Welcome, alumni. My name is Patty White, and I'm a 1976 graduate of the College of Arts and Sciences, and I'm here as your new Alumni Association president. I just want to say a huge welcome. We are so excited to see you all here, and I know you're all looking forward to hearing Nick talk later. The Alumni Association provides a very close connection between all of the 135,000 living Vanderbilt alumni and the university, and we're working constantly to deepen and make those connections more important and more tangible to all of you. ReUnion is such an exciting time. We're glad you're here. It's a great way to stay connected. You have a chance to visit with each other, your professors, to learn a little bit, to be more informed about the university, and to have a good time. I am so pleased to introduce John and Jane Ann Gass, the 2014 General ReUnion Chairs. They have done a terrific job. There's over 5,000 alumni here for the weekend. It's just going to be a great day. I'm sure the weather's going to improve. John and Jane Ann are both in the class of 1974, and John is currently serving as the chair of the Board of Visitors at the School of Engineering. So you can see he has many, many connections to the university. So right now I want to thank them for chairing this and turn the podium over to them.
Thank you, Patty. And just to introduce Jane Ann, if you want to stand up. She voted me to do the talking this afternoon. But anyway, it's great to see everybody. Thank you so much for coming and braving the elements to be here. Jane Ann and I, it's been an honor for us and a privilege to be the general chairs for this year's ReUnion. And to tell you the truth, we've just had a blast doing it. And people say, well, gosh, that sounds like a lot of work. It hasn't. It's been so much fun. It really hasn't been a lot of work because we've been good at getting other people to do all the work for us. And there are really a couple of groups that I want to thank. First, I want to thank the Alumni Relations Group. Donna Johnson's the executive director. Her team has done a fantastic job. They put all the pieces together. They're the engine that makes all this work, and I think we ought to give them a round of applause. And then the second group that I want to thank are all the volunteers that have worked on the ReUnion. We started back in February with a ReUnion Leadership Conference. We had 60 or 70 people there, the number of volunteers, and that number has grown to 546 volunteers that have worked tirelessly to contact over 11,000 alumni and produce the results that I think you're going to be impressed with here in a minute. I know there's some volunteers here in the audience. Can you raise your hand if you were a ReUnion volunteer? Yes. Thank you so much for your service and for helping us out on the ReUnion. And as I said, we will, and as Patty mentioned, we're going to have 5,100 people plus or minus on campus this weekend, 3,500 of those from the undergraduate schools. This is, I think, a really great turnout. And the big news, I guess I'd like to say, is that as a result of the efforts of this group, and the donations from alumni, we've raised over $17 million for the university. We set a goal for ourselves. Well, the goal was actually set for us by somebody, I guess, of $13 million. And after we wrestled with it for a day at the ReUnion Leadership Conference, we said, you know, we really should stretch ourselves and try to get 14 million and 14. And we're so pleased that through the generosity of so many people, we've been able to raise over $17 million. And I know there's more to come. We've had about 30% of the alumni from the 10 classes representative have made a gift of some amount. That our target is 34. We have till the end of the year to get to that target. So if you know anybody, that hasn't given or is thinking about it, please get them to push them to give a gift, small, large, or otherwise, because this area of alumni participation is an area where we have a lot of leverage and ability to really make some big improvements. And every dollar, all these $17 million are going to have an immediate impact on students here now and on students in the future. So thank you for that. I'll also say that 7 of the 10 classes represented at this year's reunion have exceeded their goals on gifts, and that's a great record. The other 3 classes, they're just a hair away from meeting their goals, and I'm confident that all those classes are going to push their totals over. So thank you again for all the work from the volunteers. Thank you again for your generosity and for making ReUnion a success. So my next duty here is a real privilege, and that is to introduce Chancellor Nick Zeppos, who's going to speak with us here. I could spend 10 minutes going over Nick's resume, and I'm not going to do that because I want to have him spend as much time as he can talking to us and answering our questions. But I'll just say that Nick started at Vanderbilt in 1987 as an assistant professor in the law school, and over the next 27 years, he rose through the ranks, and in 2008 became the 8th Chancellor of Vanderbilt. And as you walk around the campus now, you can see the fruits of Nick's vision and Nick's initiative, and several things that are very apparent to those that have had a chance to walk around. The Ingram Commons, which is, really a landmark first-year living residential experience for our students that has been so successful. The new halls of Kassam, which is sort of the next phase in the living and learning experience here at Vanderbilt for our students. And then Opportunity Vanderbilt, for those who haven't heard about that, that is the program that Vanderbilt's instituted whereby they've expanded the financial aid. They've eliminated need-based loans and substituted that with grants and scholarships that now allow Vanderbilt to compete for and get the best, the brightest, the most diverse student body in the world. And there are only a handful of schools that have gone to this sort of financial arrangement, and this is one of Nick's, I think, very important achievements. I could go on, but again, I just want to say that it's an honor and a privilege for me to introduce a friend and an exceptional leader, Chancellor Nick Zeppos.
That was great, John. Thank you so much, Jane Ann, John. Thank you for all you do for Vanderbilt. And the university is so much better because of your devotion and your whole family's devotion, multi-generational support and transformation of the university and our mission of serving others. And Patty, thank you so much. Great to have you on board. And thanks for your amazing leadership with all of these talented, engaged alumni. And I want to welcome you all to campus. And we'll get the weather straightened out and things like that, win the football game, take care of kind of the important priorities. But I really wanted to just spend a little time, not to be overly regal or anything, but kind of giving you a little bit of a state of the university address. And to really kind of talk about where's the university and how are we doing. And you take the next slide. I always like to emphasize that we're stewards of the university, that our job really is to do the best we can and really give it to the next generation with them saying, boy, someone made it better, and we're so lucky now to be at Vanderbilt, part of Vanderbilt. And so I think we have to kind of keep in mind that in our society, where things are decided like this sometimes, or information moves quickly, or people get bored after, reading 3 text messages, we're in it for the long haul. We're in it for the long haul, not years, decades. Our work is literally centuries old. And when you think of America and so many great things in this country, I think it's hard to say that there's something better produced in America than its great research universities. We are unparalleled in our devotion, our commitment, and our belief that our nation, and indeed the whole world, really is advanced by places like Vanderbilt. And John and Patty used the word privilege and honor. And as you heard, Lydia, you can stand up. Here's the best. Come on, come on, come on. Greatest First Lady in the history of Vanderbilt. I know for the current time being at least one of the 8 greatest chancellors, but clearly the greatest First Lady. But this concept of privilege and honor, you know, as John mentioned, this is my 28th year at Vanderbilt. And I was just privileged to be asked to join the faculty, and I am a full professor, and it's great to be the chancellor, but the real honor is to be invited to this community. And we were invited in 1986, and you know, people say, well, that's really great, you're the chancellor. And I said, I made a decision a long time ago with Lydia, we're going to stay at Vanderbilt, and we're going to stay in Nashville. And we feel like Vanderbilt and Nashville have just gotten that much better. So, next slide. I kind of want to just talk a little bit about, you know, some things going on, but really with a focus on our kind of strategic plan, and then with a sense of how does this play out in 2 really important ways, which are the students and the faculty. The thing that I always emphasize, and there are a lot of beautiful buildings. I think I probably played some role in some of them going up. I always say, I know I hold the note on all of them, and so the mortgage is my responsibility. But you know, I think the real key is to understand we are a human capital institution. We just take really amazing people or people in real need, people who have maybe been to other hospitals or other physicians, and we say we are going to devote ourselves tirelessly to the development of human potential, to the cure of disease. And so we'll talk a lot about buildings and things like that, but the thing I really want to emphasize is we are all about talented people, humans at various stages that we're going to develop. So I then want to end up, I should probably put it first because it's probably the thing I worry about the most, which is, you know, they can say, well, you built a nice building or you built an ugly building, but you really never want to say, boy, you left this place in financial distress, or you really had a lot of problems that you left for the next generation. And so that's something, the stewardship and the finances are really, really, really important. So let me start out with values and strategy. And this was kind of interesting. I've got John Hindle, I've got Becky, I've got Michael Ainsley. I don't know if there are any trustees in the room, but other trustees. I know Gene Shanks is here, and I know that because he parked in my parking space this morning. And there he is right there. And you know, and I just said, I saw this Georgia tag, and I've got a kind of a inquisitive mind, a prosecutorial mind. I was like, all right, someone parked in my spot. It was from Georgia. I said, no, that's a rental car. You know, trace that Board of Trust tag. But all I can say is, you know, someone from the class of 1969 or whatever, they park anywhere. Park anywhere. So great to see you, Gene. I think our strategy is really interesting, and I think it's interesting because it really was a planning process that we undertook that included students, faculty, trustees, alumni. We're going to continue this process, but what was really interesting about it was I thought it was really important to use a values-driven approach to really say, you know, what's unique about Vanderbilt? And the amazing thing was that as we went into this, you always wonder in an academic institution, which is, you know, I say I work in a graveyard, a lot of people underneath, nobody listening. So you really worry that you're going to sit around and say, what's unique about Vanderbilt? And it's like, Rotiers. Or, you know, it's just, you never know what you're going to get. But that's, again, we're human capital. Everyone has views, and it's interesting. But the interesting thing was everyone we talked to started kind of coalescing, whether it was the board of trust, whether it was alumni, whether it was the faculty. We are a real community. We like each other. We work well together. And if you've been at not just universities, but any human capital institution, you got a lot of people that are kind of, I'm on my own. So that sense of community. Also, the ideas here and the mission is really, really important. So I often say, when you get into discussions with people or faculty, academics can be a contact sport. We're really civil to each other. What do you think? What do you think? So now we started to say, all right, this is really unique. And I always emphasize this. I recruit a lot of people. My management team, large part of my management team is in front here. They could work anywhere. And I always say to them, this is a really friendly collegial place. And they're like, yeah, that's what they said at my law firm. That's what they said at IBM, and And it's amazing that everyone we recruit here notices that. And any consultant I bring in, I said, we're unusual. It's like, yeah, we hear that from all our clients. After 1 or 2 visits, it's like, you're different from fill in the blank, whatever school. I believe that kind of the mission and legitimacy of Vanderbilt really relies on access to education and the American dream. I really believe that America stands for the idea of opportunity, access, and the mobility and opportunity to have a better life that comes from that opportunity and that access. So that is just an unyielding value that we have. And it's not just Vanderbilt, it's really what our nation, what makes our country unique. And it's why people love this country and why people still want to come to America. We're about excellence. Doesn't matter what we do. It's got to be excellent. And we're always at the perimeter of knowledge. We're going to innovate. We're going to do something different. We're going to invent something. We're going to treat it in a different way. We're going to perform Shakespeare in a different way. Everything is new, exciting, new knowledge. And then finally, our mission, it's really basic. We serve humanity. Whatever we do, it's about serving humanity. So we all sat around, we said, this is kind of who we are. This is what's in our DNA. So let's develop a first cut at a strategy. Next slide. So this was really interesting. This was Susan Wente, our great provost, sure to be the greatest provost ever. She really led this with John Gear, who's now a vice provost and formerly chair of our outstanding political science department. And you really kind of see, we kind of took some current issues, but some timeless issues as well that are distinctly Vanderbilt. So I think it's really important to say we are going to have the best undergraduate residential experience in a research university. We are going to define what it means to go to college at a great American research university. And that's really important, and never take it for granted. Because at a lot of schools, it's about we're a research university where undergraduates come. We believe those things go hand in hand. Trans-institutional programs, we're civil, we're collegial. We're all packed together. You can walk from here to biochemistry, clinical pharmacology, ophthalmology in 10 minutes. Problems presented as we serve humanity are not in silos of disciplines or departments. They are complex problems that require philosophers, English professors, ethicists, biochemists. So we're really good at leveraging assets, human capital, space. When you look at buildings on the campus, they're usually always built as intersection buildings. What happens there? People live and learn with faculty. What happens there? The engineering faculty are with the radiology faculty and the physics department. So we're really good at that, and we can solve problems that other universities can't. Education technologies, you hear all the time about, the internet's going to kind of replace higher education, and I'm still waiting for someone who has children at home to say, yeah, my child's going to learn on the internet on the 3rd floor. And all you're waiting to do is get them, particularly if you have sons, not playing video games and off to college. So, but yet there's something going on here, something important. Vanderbilt is a real innovator in this space. We export a lot of our knowledge currently for free because we think that since we're a creator of knowledge, we ought to try to broadcast that around the world to improve the condition of humanity. And so you hear about Coursera, edX, and other things like that. We play in those spaces, and my vice provost, Cynthia Cyrus, told me I actually got a large royalty check from Coursera, which I never thought I would see. But the more important point is we have over 300,000 to 400,000 people taking classes around the world in a variety of disciplines. An English class, a computer programming class, a nutrition class. We're about to ramp up a personalized medicine class. So people around the world can learn about what's this stuff called genomics, proteomics, and personalized medicine. So we need to own that space, and we need to be able to articulate what works and what doesn't work in that space. Finally, I pound on this all the time, healthcare solutions. Vanderbilt is uniquely positioned to come up with solutions in healthcare. And I know some of you on the A&S advisory committee this morning heard from Jonathan Metzel. Disease presents itself not as a purely biological problem. It is a cluster of environment. It is a cluster involving education, nutrition, home support systems. And as much as we like to make a discovery in the lab that there's a target, and we have a target, and we have something that hits the target, and it knocks the disease out, the wide berth of solving chronic disease particularly is going to be from the humanities, the social sciences, the biological sciences, and the physical sciences. So these all come together, and then we think then that Vanderbilt is a place where we can teach across the campus, discover across the campus, immerse our students more in the life of discovery and innovation and research. Next slide. Okay, let me talk about our students a little bit. Affordability, access, American dream, balance. So the first three you understand, that's kind of, if we don't do that, we ought to just shut the place down. If we're really not open to an access and the American dream, why are we here? I emphasize balance because that's kind of the Vanderbilt brand. And as you think about your own experience, and we think about our students, whatever their profile is now, our kids are unique because they have everything. We look for students and draw students who are kind of in equipoise in a really interesting way. So someone might be interested in biomolecular engineering, but also want to play in a student symphony because she plays the viola. Someone is interested in music, but they're very interested in biochemistry because they want to go to medical school but sing opera in college. The social and the academic here, that this is a place of great excellence, of achievement, but yet is a place of warmth and fun. So that's kind of the way Vanderbilt presents itself to the world. And I'm sure when you were in college, you always had things in balance. Never too much fun. And always, kind of, if I'd walk through I'd walk through the student lounges at Saturday night, there you are studying, I bet. I know I was there. Okay, so let's talk about our students. John mentioned, next slide. John mentioned our Opportunity Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt meets 100% of demonstrated financial need with gifts and no loans. Okay, what that means is really simple. someone applies to Vanderbilt, the first thing you have to understand is we have need-blind admissions. Okay, so some colleges, in fact, the vast majority of colleges run admissions like an airline business. And what they do is they'll sit around and say, okay, I got to generate a margin here. So, all right, what about those first 4 people up there? What are they paying for those seats? Frequent flyers. There's no margin on that. Okay, you got to sell a bunch of first-class seats. You got to sell a bunch of business seats. Spike the price 2 days in advance. And then you look at the class, then you look at the plane and say, you know what? This thing cost me $3 million to fly from here to Boston, and I can make $300,000 on that plane. So what colleges do, they'll actually do kind of wallet analysis when they admit. They'll say, all right, how much can this kid pay? And let's build the class so we have enough money, and we'll actually take students who maybe don't present as strong, but they can generate the margin for us. So the first thing Vanderbilt does is it does not do need-aware admissions. You go to the admissions committee, and they say, boy, you're really good. We don't know anything about your financial circumstances. Then put a financial aid package together. Well, in the past, Vanderbilt had very high loans. So it'd say, all right, you're going to get $25,000 in financial aid. And it's like, that's great, I got $25,000 scholarship. Well, $6,000 is a loan. And what we started to see is that kids would not apply to Vanderbilt who were really good kids, Vanderbilt kids. The second thing is we noticed that kids would drop out of Vanderbilt at fairly high numbers because their parents would say, this is a lot of debt. And I always chuckle, I believe in efficient markets and good information, people make rational decisions. But I think we expect too much when there's a family with a child in college, 2 children in college, and they're sitting around the dining room table, and it's like, well, Vanderbilt looks pretty good. They give you $5,000, you got a $5,000 loan. And it's like, yeah, but I ran a spreadsheet, and I'm going to make X amount. You discount that over 30 years. This is the best investment we'll ever make. People don't think like that. They're looking at, I got another $5,000 in loan. And people say, well, this is a child's decision. It's a family decision. So we saw this was really not living up to our values and really affecting the admission and retention and graduation. So, in one of the most foolish decisions I've ever made, I think it was a week after Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. Timing in life is everything. And I said, you know what, this is really important, and we are going to do this. And we had made great progress on financial aid investments, and we did it. And we've raised a significant amount of money, and many of you have contributed to that. And there's nothing more important or redeeming than when you send a child through college, because it's almost like you're sending your own son or daughter. It's just really an amazing gift for life. So that has gone into effect. Next slide. And we have, I think, been a leader in access, affordability, and the American dream. This is an interesting slide. I show it all the time. They'll probably put it in my sarcophagus when they have the grand funeral. What this tells you on the bottom is $20,000 on the left, $300,000 on the right. The vertical bars are the average aid package, and then the line that goes through and dips down is the number of students receiving financial aid. And I like to show this slide because one of the most amazing things about Vanderbilt is, I love that, people say, you're really elite. And I say, well, yeah, I mean, we're a great institution. People want to be affiliated and go here. But, we've got a lot of people under $40,000. There are a lot of people that would be considered poor at an elite place. That's extraordinary. But then people say to me, yeah, but what about everyone else? The interesting thing is, as you go across here, you kind of get into the wide middle class and upper middle class of America. And you start to see now, wow, all right, so there are a lot of kids on financially in the middle class, but then this one really surprises people, unless you're at this income level and trying to send children to college. There actually is financial aid that goes out to, here's about 40 people making $300,000 who get financial aid. And so this is a program that is kind of really there for everybody. And the magic, the secret sauce of Vanderbilt is, where else do you see that range of people cheek to jowl sharing rooms, packed together, wanting to be with each other, earning their way in? I've said it repeatedly, I insist the only other place where this happens is a Southwest Airlines flight. This is what Vanderbilt's about, and it is what, you know, I think the best of American values really stand for. Next slide. Now, this is really interesting, and, you know, I eventually have to sign off on tuition. And Vanderbilt, setting of tuition every year is one of the most interesting exercises ever done. And I've given this to undergraduate students to just say, what would you do? Here's kind of what this looks like. And you get the econ majors, and they're like, oh, supply demand? I mean, I'd go 15%. Look at the supply demand curve you have here. I was like, yeah, but what about the regulatory impulse in Washington? And they want to treat me like a utility. And yeah, you know, kind of go soft, you know, raise it 7%. And I said, well, you know, but there's still people that strains and things like that. So every year we kind of go through this, how do you set tuition? And I remember setting as the provost, and now our great provost will have the pleasure of setting it as well. And I used to just kind of say, okay, if this were really a market, what could you charge? I mean, just get the econ folks in here and say, here's supply, here's demand, here are the barriers to entry. Now let's just back up a second. When I said we're in this for centuries, the average age of a private AAU research university is 222 years. So now just to really get like, you know, just imagine you're making cars. You know, you're Elon Musk. And you're like, everyone wants this car. Yeah, but Elon, these people at MIT, Vanderbilt, they're coming up with these new methods. There hasn't been a new car maker for 222 years. So that's one way to look at it. Then you think of the moral part, you think of the sticker price and everything like that. So what Vanderbilt has decided to do is to really try to keep the tuition increases kind of at what you'd call cost of living. Now, just to get technical about this, there are actually there's something called the HEPI, the Higher Education Price Index, which is driven by a lot of factors, including the cost of regulation, by the way. Okay? So do you think the cost of regulation, if I raise tuition 2%, is your regulation going up less than 2%, you think? Any of your businesses? You're in the financial business? Running a bank holding company? Okay. So, but we decided we were going to keep our tuition low. So there's also something called, for really into this, called Bird Pie, which is the biomedical research cost of living index. And that's like buying test tubes and machines. That's usually 2 to 3 times higher than the cost of living. So when I go into the lab and make your way over to our labs and you go in and you look at it and you're like, what did that thing cost? So there are various ways to look at it, but this is an interesting chart. Here's Caltech. They've increased tuition 14.85% over the last, that would be 3 to 4 years. And you know, Caltech's, but Caltech's really an unusual place. I mean, it's a really unusual place. They have very few students. You know, their average SAT, I think, is like 1610. They have like a different SAT at Caltech because it's unbelievable. It makes MIT look like, homeschooling. I mean, it's just so off the charts. Then there's Rice University. Now, Rice is my favorite natural experiment. because you always get the, wow, here's what you do. Cut your tuition, and then everyone will turn down the other schools for price. And it's kind of like, well, look at the supply-demand, look at financial aid. Rice actually had that strategy. They always had the lowest tuition. And they're sitting around and they're leaving all this money on the table. So about 6 years ago, I think Rice just said, you know what, we're going up like 5% a year. Brett, is that about right? Yeah. And Mr. Rice, I think William Marsh Rice, rest his soul, I think he originally said, I only want no tuition. I mean, it's just amazing. So look we're here at 6%. I always say, if you want to criticize me as a business person, I'm leaving margin on the table for moral and, kind of trying to send a signal of responsibility that we can work this place at a really, really low tuition rate. I'm just flabbergasted. I mean, you'll see some of the sizes of these. Here's a school in New Haven. God, look at that, 11%. Here's a place in New Jersey, Princeton, 11%. I'm just like I love all these places and I love their presidents, but I'm like, God, 11%, what? And I just think it's probably like, you kind of hear behind the scenes, they're exercising pricing power. It's like, we got 30,000 applications, you got 1,200 spots, you know what we're going to do? We're going to raise the price. And our yield is 70%, you don't want to come, someone else will take your spot. So we're trying to keep our tuition low, trying to now when I first got in the business, it was kind of what you call the Chivas Regal effect, that if you didn't set your tuition high, people wouldn't want to go there. No, really, there was a whole pricing strategy you see in business, which is if you discount too much, people are like, what's wrong with that place? And educational institutes, particularly law schools, followed that. And we live in a very different time. Next one. This is another one of my favorite slides. I went to a great land-grant university. And I think my first year tuition was something like $280. And then he gave me a scholarship. The real crisis in America is we're not supporting these public universities. I mean, and there are a lot of reasons. You hear about Medicaid crowding, budget crowding out other things, but it's really a problem. So what's going on is state university tuition increases at what you call public flagships are higher than the privates. That's number one. They're really jacking up the tuition on out-of-staters. So if you're UC Berkeley or University of Michigan, University of Wisconsin, you're saying, you know what? I'm just going to charge a really high tuition for the out-of-staters. And then, unfortunately, you're now starting to see very large percentages of out-of-state students at state flagships. And a lot of international students as well, because they're paying, remember the airline analogy, they're buying the ticket 1 hour before, and they're going to pay that. So what this slide tells us is something very remarkable for Vanderbilt, but dismaying, I think, for the public universities. If you make about $120,000, it's actually, all things being equal, we're doing averages here, cheaper to send your child to Vanderbilt with our financial aid program than your in-state public flagship. It's actually cheaper to send your child at that income level and below to Vanderbilt over University of Maryland, UCLA. The even more remarkable thing is because they have jacked up the out-of-state tuition so much. And I always tell people, I think 35 to 40% of the students at University of Alabama are out of state. That's probably where they're losing so much. I don't know. They lost 3 in a row, didn't they, to ranked teams? Okay, so what this tells us is if you're at around $300,000, with our financial aid plan, it's actually cheaper to send your child to Vanderbilt than an out-of-state Ivy, public Ivy. So if you're living in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and you say, you know, Katie comes home and says, I really want to go to the University of Michigan. And you go to, he's like, yeah, the University of Michigan, it's a great school. What's the tuition? 40-some thousand dollars out of state. Actually, if you make $300,000 or less, cheaper on average to go to Vanderbilt with our financial aid. Next slide. So what does this all mean? It means that we have thrown the doors of the university open to meritorious people from all around the country, all around the world, and when you do that, a lot of people want to come. And remember, we're civil, we're friendly, we're nice. And a lot of these other places are not nice. I can tell you, they're not nice, believe me. Listen, I always tell a story. I recruited a faculty member from a school. You know, I've recruited faculty members. My balance of trade with the Northeastern schools is very positive. I'm a strong net importer. And they'll come and they'll meet people and they'll say to their colleagues here, you actually like each other. And that really means something. Okay, so what this means then is, okay, so we're doing well. And here are the total number of applications, 11,170. Our freshman class stayed pretty much at 1,600. And then it was like, oh, we did Opportunity Vanderbilt. We opened up the Commons. Now there are about 30,000 applications. And the admit rate has gone from 38% to 13%. The yield is 37%, 42%. Now yield, as selectivity goes up, yield should go down because you're competing against tougher teams, right? So it's like if someone says, well, I want to join the SEC. I'm in the MAC now, and I'm 10-2 in the MAC. It's like, all right, you're going to come in the SEC. You'd be 1-11. You're competing against a tougher competition. Notice our yield went up. That's fabulous. Rule of thumb, SAT score you'll see is going up there. For every 1,000 applications, your SAT will just go up 6 points because you just have more people applying. And the nice thing about the SAT is when you're so many applications, you're almost not managing to a score. The schools that manage to the score are the schools that say, we got to report a 1350 or we'll look bad. And they'll get some kid that's like, well, look at, you know, Johnny has a 1410. Yeah, but he's got a 2.1. He's screaming warning. Johnny doesn't work. Johnny's like, you know, I mean, he's waiting to be, he thinks he's Einstein. He's so brilliant, doesn't have to work. They'll take Johnny. We kind of like, grandchildren, children, I'm going to give you my piece of advice here. The most important thing for applying to Vanderbilt, you know, grade scores, that's great, but it's the essays and the recommendations and good activities. That's what we're building, a community here. Next slide. This is like, you know, I guess moving into the SEC. So on the left, those are the top 10 competitors. We could have won that conference, couldn't we, in football? I mean, look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Northwestern, they beat us. So they got our number. They got someone's number. Now you go to the right, and you see, okay, it's Duke. Duke's always number one. I think that's just the way it is. We're two great schools in the same neighborhood. And then you see Harvard, Stanford, Yale, and it's like, well, where did Stanford come from? And then it's like, well, there's Princeton. Where did that come from? And Wash U's still there, Northwestern, Penn, Rice, and Cornell. So our students are just saying, I'm going to the best school, and I want to find a really special place. And that's who we compete against. And our financial aid and our community is what brings us the great kids. Next slide. Okay, so this one I really like. This is a new one. I really like it. We're passing out the slide in the back. I really like this one because on the left, you see SAT scores, schools by SAT scores. You know, big surprise, Caltech is first. You know, the average SAT score at Caltech is 1545. And I think if you get a 1590 in math, you're probably in remedial math at Caltech. Yeah. Yeah, you talk to the graduate students and the professors at Caltech, they'll say, what's the biggest challenge? We're afraid of the students. They're so smart. So that's interesting. Then University of Chicago, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, MIT, Vanderbilt, 7th. And then you see all these other schools. There's Dartmouth, Rice, Northwestern, Stanford, Columbia, Wash U. These little gems here. Look at these little gems. Williams, Amherst, Swarthmore, Bowdoin. And, you know, and then I always emphasize that people get so hung up about this test. I mean, people are more afraid of this than getting medical tests. In fact, I bet if you put 10 people in a room and ask them, 100 people, what's your blood type, what's your SAT score? They would know their SAT score, but not their blood type. It's like way too much stress involved. Take a prep class for the prep class, you know, get the tutor, the bespoke tutor. But there we are. But look on the right. This is a survey the Princeton Review did of who are the happiest students. Vanderbilt, first. Where else? Balance, community, friendship, inclusion, civility. Where else would you find that? Boy, I'm having a great time. I'm so happy here. And I really got a high SAT score. I mean, that's like usually the opposite. That guy got a high score. Yeah, look at it. He's a grind. Really unhappy. No fun to be with. So that's really great. And I'm like, I'm loving this. Look at this. College of Idaho. I mean, beautiful Idaho, and I understand people happy looking at the mountains, and I'm like, Vanderbilt. Okay. And notice Rice is there, but none of our other competitors are really there. Very interesting. Claremont McKenna's a good school. Okay, next slide. Now, the other thing I want to emphasize is, you know, it's kind of like what really goes on, and I never get involved in admissions cases. It's like the central rule of being a college president or chancellor, and it's violated a lot. I've seen so many people go off sides on this. And I've always tell everyone that, you know, they got 30,000 applications. I'm going to show up and say, this person's really good. Would you read the other 29,999 chancellor? I was like, no. The other thing I always encourage people is, if you say you don't get involved in admissions and the child doesn't get in, and I've had family members that didn't get in. And, you know, my cousin will call me and I say, I don't get involved in admissions. But then if a child gets in, they call you and thank you. And you say, I don't get involved in admissions. Say, well, yeah, I know that. You did it for me. You did it for me. You did it for me. You and I are like this. So this is a really holistic process. And the scores are great, everything's great. But look at this. 1,605 members of this class, 100% of them leadership or scholarship, student body president, 100% class president, student senator, editor-in-chief of the newspaper yearbook, Eagle Scout, National Honorary Society, 100%. Look at this, 52% athletics leaders and champions. No wonder I'm winning NCAA championships. Look at this. Fine arts leaders, service leaders, 90%. These are really amazingly balanced, multi-talented people who offer so much, but have so much potential. Next slide. Okay, so we got the students, they're great, but we have to develop the students. The big mistake everyone makes is these kids come in, they got these grades, they got all these activities, they're perfect. We're just stamping a passport, right? It's like, okay, go get a job, got accepted to Vanderbilt. We are so focused on developing them in every way. So the faculty are actually a key to that. And our faculty is as good, dedicated, distinguished as any faculty. How do I measure the faculty? Next slide. First, research funding. One of the interesting things about Vanderbilt is the faculty are almost like, I always say, they're like equity partners in a firm, and we're kind of an eat-what-you-kill environment. They're not just sitting back with a $20 billion endowment saying, oh, you know, the payments will roll out. When you put the whole thing together with the medical school and the hospitals and clinics, we're about 4%, Brett, tuition driven? Yeah. So we get about $550, $600 million from grants. And that's a big chunk of our budget. We are 9th in the country in NIH funding. 9th in the country. Next slide. This is an interesting slide because what it shows you is the vertical bars are the amount of Vanderbilt research funding by fiscal year. And then the red line going through is actually the NIH budget. So the NIH budget is basically flat, okay? And that's not adjusted for cost of living. Brett? Is it? No. So if this were adjusted for cost of living, and remember bird pie, that index for science, what's amazing is Vanderbilt's increase is 4.1% versus 8.6%. Our faculty are the hardest working, distinguished, devoted faculty you will find. And our hit rate on grants is amazing. This is a national crisis. Some people are not getting their first grant for research until they're in their 40s. And you tell somebody, hey, you're going to go to college for 4 years. You're going to go to graduate school for 7 years. Then you're going to do a postdoc for 2 years. And then you're going to get hired as an assistant professor without tenure. And then when you're 40, you may get a grant. You know what they're going to say? If we don't get on this, they're going to say, you know what? I'm going to law school. It's true. It's true. I mean, you're seeing talent will move to where there are opportunities. Well, I got a slide, I got a YouTube from Brett the other day. It was by the head of the new person running the Harvard Endowment, and he's a quant statistician. And he says that the reason there's so much financial engineering and so many people moved into quantitative analysis was they shut down the Large Hadron Collider. And those physicists had nowhere to go. And so they all went and said, well, geez, I'll just run my models on these wave functions that are just derivatives or whatever. So this is a real challenge, but our faculty are amazing. Amazing. Next. This was nice too. So, you know, Vanderbilt, I always say, is just this like hybrid between a beautiful liberal arts college devoted to liberal arts education crossed with a research university of the greatest distinction. And so what you always worry is, lost in that is the undergraduate. And what was really nice was when U.S. News came out with the rankings, they had us kind of number 8 devoted to undergraduate teaching. And that's strong because there are a lot of research universities that don't have faculty teaching undergraduates, that are not devoted to undergraduates. And we are, and we think that that makes Vanderbilt really, really special. Next. Vanderbilt's physician, the best of the best. I'm talking about the faculty, and I really want to emphasize how extraordinary the medical school and the medical school faculty are. These are teachers, researchers, care providers, and they are extraordinary. They're extraordinary. And the nursing staff and the nursing faculty, extraordinary. And so Vanderbilt is the place to go for care, locally, regionally, increasingly nationally and internationally. And we have the best doctors that one can imagine. And keep in mind, they're not just taking care of patients, they've got all the future physicians following them, and the residents and the interns and the fellows. So they are really, really exceptional. Now, next. These are some of the awards that we always get kind of one top hospital list. And we are, you'll see on the left, healthcare is kind of moving forward pretty dramatically. Average length of stay, complication rates, expected mortality, readmit rates. You're starting to see more emphasis on quality. And it's like you go to a hospital, the surgeon's great, and then you get an infection. Doesn't matter how great the surgeon is if you're back in the hospital. So these are things we really excel in. And we annually get on the best hospital list. Next. Next slide. I want to mention our children's hospital too, and just the overall university. The Monroe Carroll Jr. Children's Hospital at Vanderbilt is an extraordinary place, and it's a beautiful place that takes in very, very sick children and manages to send them out to lead full lives. And that hospital is only about 9, 10 years old, and we already have over 10 specialties that are nationally ranked. It's extraordinary for the university and for the community. Okay, let me just talk a little bit about buildings of the future. This is an engineering and science building. This is Olin Hall. I had someone say to me, "You're not going to cover up Olin Hall, are you?" And this is, it's kind of, I always describe it as if you hit a long home run over the right field fence, this is what you'll hit. And so it's right there near the baseball field. And this was prime real estate. This is it. This is like on the Gold Coast of Vanderbilt. And so we decided that we were going to put there a biomedical science engineering building that would bring interdisciplinary trans-institutional teams together. And then the glass space you see there is an entrepreneurship innovation center where youngsters, students can meet with venture capital, with faculty, with tech transfer people to develop potential new businesses. And so this will be kind of an incubator for that sort of creative, innovative, entrepreneurial, research-based strategy we have going forward. Next. I'm sure I had people, did anyone live in the very first CASAM? I always have to ask this. The very, very first CASAM. The first one. Okay, there you go. Anyone else? So that was right over here, wasn't it? Buddy? Right over here, right, right. It's a beautiful old building, and it didn't quite make it. Didn't quite make it. So then that was replaced by CASAM, son of CASAM. Yeah. And many of you then lived in son of CASAM, right? Who lived in that one? Yeah, okay, yeah. And then, what? I never lived in it, buddy. Of course, no, but when you saw the pictures, it was so classic collegiate architecture, I wish someone would have preserved it like Benson Science to kind of weave the fabric of old and new together. But we replaced CASAM with 2 new residential colleges, continuing our kind of integration of living and learning and faculty living together. And we had, I think, about 2,300 students apply for 660 spots. And so this is really, really an attractive way for youngsters to live and learn together. Next to this, of course, is Vanderbilt Barnard. Hang on one second. You might have heard there was mold in that building this year. I've kind of got it next to the wrecking ball, that one. And then I really need to take those towers down. Yeah. They're a deferred maintenance nightmare. And the idea of putting new windows, new HVAC, and fixing it up, I just don't even want to think of it. But this is just beautiful. It was designed off of kind of the Kirkland Hall architecture and the traditional collegiate Gothic red brick that's so Vanderbilt. Next. This is in addition to the Children's Hospital. We can't build beds fast enough to take care of children who need the Vanderbilt care. And so this will take us, I think, above 300 beds, Susie? Yeah, and maybe even get us with the shelf floors closer to 400. Now, that's a pretty big children's hospital. And it is an amazing place of hope and love and discovery. It is unbelievable. Okay, next. Let me finally turn to stewardship and finances. And we got this Opportunity Vanderbilt thing going on. We're building these buildings. I always emphasize, very proud to say, all the buildings that have been built over the last 5 years have been built with cash, no debt, philanthropy, and the savings of the university. So there's been no new debt on CASAM, no new debt on the recreational facility, no new debt on the children's hospital additions. And so we just feel like it's really important to live within our means and be good stewards. Next slide. This is interesting. These are our kind of these are our operating results over the last 10 to 11 years. And see, in FY03, we made $33 million. And people say, well, why do you make money? You're a not-for-profit. And I think one reason not-for-profits maybe don't survive is not-for-profit does not mean you lose money. It just means you take the earnings and you invest it in these noble ventures that you're doing. So, you know, we got to run a good bottom line. And you got to remember, too, can you imagine the reserve and replacement and the depreciation on these buildings? Our margins are razor thin. So you see the operating margins were, you know, I think, you know, okay here. I always wish they were better. And then they start to go up kind of here. And I thought, well, that's because I became the chancellor. And then you see these declines. And, you know, our trustees would know this is healthcare driven. This is all driven by kind of cuts in healthcare expenditures, payers cutting back, and fairly significant revenue drops, $200–300 million a year revenue drop in the hospitals and clinics. And so, you know, getting that thing to right size is not easy because there are a lot of fixed costs in there. So we had 2 years that were, you know, good historically, but certainly humbling for me as we kind of got through those years. Jeff Balzer, some of you medical school graduates spend time with Jeff. He's phenomenal. He's a visionary, courageous, really intelligent leader, and we're really, really lucky to have him over the hospitals and clinics. But that's a work in progress. I mean, it's healthcare is, you know, other than college athletics, I'd say it's the fastest moving business we have, the most change coming. Next. This is interesting. This is our debt over the years. And so we built a lot of things, and then we peaked at the debt in 2009, and then I had a great recession. That was fun. And then we've actually been paying our debt down. And what do we pay, Brett? About $40 million a year of our principal. And then if we can take debt out because we have a little bit more cash and it's high-priced debt, we'll kind of try to make the balance sheet look better. You know, I've learned over time that make it a great place that everyone wants to come to school, have a lot of cash on hand. I met with our auditors the other day with Brett, and the head auditor, he's the higher ed partner for PwC. He came in, he had a big smile on his face. I was like, oh, good, I'm not getting written up. And he said, you guys are really liquid. You have more cash for savings to withstand hits than a lot of your peers. And so we just feel like, boy, it'd be fun to take the debt out or whatever like that, but we just feel like we can live within our means, and then, you know, maybe we take more debt out in the future, or, you know, if we're still modest, someone later coming along, remember, we're just taking our turn. This is not my university. I'm just trying to hand it over better than I got it. So I like this, the blue line. Next slide. Blue line is actually the endowment. And so now you see the endowment over 14 years. And you can kind of just pick out your bear markets or your, you know, kind of put on your 5-point harness markets around these times. But I'm really pleased. We're above our high water mark. And a lot of universities have not gotten past their high water mark. And so prudence, and I think your generosity and the generosity of so many others have really contributed to that. Okay, next slide. This is really shows how competitive our universe is and why we really try to run a lean and very, very fiscally prudent operation. Princeton University has $2.2 million in endowment per student. And this is interesting. It's a very interesting business. So if your child goes to that college and you write the full check, they're paying out 5% on $2.2 million per student. So they've decided that they're going to put $110,000 on top of your tuition to educate your child. And I call that winning the lottery. I mean, that's amazing. And you'll see these endowments for students. There's Vanderbilt. Remember, we're a young university. Remember, we're not even 150 years old. I mean, most of these universities are kind of pre-Revolutionary War. Remember, Harvard was older at the Revolution than we are today. So you put $1 in the Harvard endowment, they still have it, and it has grown. Yeah. And people say, how do I live forever? Put your money in a college endowment. You'll live forever. These are amazing institutions. But we really, really, look how we compete. Look at this, almost 1/10 endowment per student. But we run harder. We manage better. We take care of each other. We got a great community. It's about our culture. And that's why we think we can compete. Next slide. I want to talk about your engagement. Not to your lovely bride or something, although I'd love to hear that story about how you might have met. Next slide. I think the most important thing is to realize that the students I talked about are simply alumni in waiting. And I think the culture we've tried to create here is when you come to Vanderbilt, you're a student, but it's Vanderbilt for life. So when Carol or Patty or John are talking to these youngsters, it's like, you're in the Vanderbilt family. This is at freshman. This is at the Founders Walk. And so they need to connect to the alumni for so many reasons. And I think your love and passion for the university and what we're about is made possible through that connection of learning about these kids and what they are, and what they want to do, and who they can be. So we really like volunteer and alumni engagement. Career advising is a key area for us. We had 5,500 alumni kind of doing career advising for the kids. And we're about to start a new process to kind of ramp that up even more. We had 47 summer send-off parties, 4,500 attendees. Student Alumni Board held over 40 events. We are seeing much more alumni engagement, and I think that's really important. A lot of alumni, 3,300 core alumni volunteers, conducted 6,000 interviews. If you want to interview students for Vanderbilt, sign up. It's like, who's coming to Vanderbilt? Sign up, interview some of these kids. Get to meet them. Next slide. Alumni fundraising programs. On the left, we call this the kind of young alumni, 10 years out. And, you know, these are kind of kids that I think are a little bit more wired to social media, and, you know, kind of getting them engaged right away is really interesting, important, and possible. And then all of a sudden, if you say, hey, there's a Vanderbilt Club event in New York City, and our RSVP list will be 150, Alex will be there, and all of a sudden 300 people come. It's like went out on Facebook. They're all there. So that's very, very promising. This one I'm very pleased with, particularly with Opportunity Vanderbilt. These are the people who are getting all these scholarships from Vanderbilt. Look at the senior class giving over time. In 2010, 20% of the graduates, before they graduated, gave. Last year, 71.9% of the seniors gave to Vanderbilt. I mean, that really chokes me up, because these are kids who are on scholarship, a lot of kids on scholarship, or if they're not on scholarship, they paid that sticker price. But yet there's something about this place and their feeling toward it and their sense of pride and their sense of competition. I mean, when I showed them the rates in the 20s and I said, okay, here are 7 schools that are above us, and they've got no spirit compared to us. I mean, let's get out and do it. And we don't even push these kids. They do it themselves. So this, I think, bodes really well for the future. And there's actually some research now that people who are on scholarship give back maybe at a higher rate in the sense of gratitude. So these are beautiful little acorns being planted just for more trees to blossom for our beautiful university. They're just beautiful. Next. This is one of my favorite quotes. Takes a noble man to plant a seed for a tree that will someday give shade to people he may never meet. And who better than the Commodore? Gave the $1 million, knew the bishop through Frank Crawford, Vanderbilt, never came to the place, never saw Vanderbilt. And he decided that he would plant a seed, and look how many people are under the shade of that tree. And I insist repeatedly that he was the toughest business person. He was ruthless. But he was a man of honor and integrity. He was not a big charitable giver. This was a really important act for him, and that's why we named a residence hall after his spouse. We think she was facilitating the gift as he healed up the wounds between North and South. If you dug him up today and said, we want to take you around the campus, he'd say, I was the richest man in America. I should have started 50 of these. My name is still on this? This is what my $1 million gave birth to? Wow. This is the very, very, very best investment I could have ever made. And I don't know any of you people, but whoever did this, you are the best co-investors and stewards of any money that I've ever had. So we're all privileged to be here and stand under the shade of these beautiful trees. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions.